Chris Walton was the kind of father who lived for the little things: pancake sundaes, bedtime stories, and long walks through the woods with his daughter Emily. A software engineer by profession, he often found solace away from the screen, trading, in the glow of monitors, for the hush of the forest. That's why, every summer since Emily was 6, the two would take a private trip into the Great Smoky Mountains. No distractions, no cell service, just a father and daughter chasing fireflies and carving their names into tree trunks. In the summer of 2020, they chose a lesser-known trail called Raven's Hollow, an old path rumored to be abandoned by rangers due to erosion, but still accessible through an unmarked fork past the main trail. Chris had read about it in an old hiking forum where thrill-seekers talked about the untouched beauty and how it feels like walking into another time. For Chris, it was perfect. For Emily, it was a fairy tale. She packed her favorite stuffed bear and sketched what she imagined the forest spirits might look like. They parked their silver Subaru at the Klingman's Dome overlook, signed the trail ledger as CNE, off to explore, and started their descent into the woods. Multiple hikers would later recall seeing them that morning: Chris with a blue backpack, Emily skipping beside him wearing a pink cap. Nothing seemed off. The weather was clear, the trail was dry, and their gear looked sufficient for a 2-night hike. Everything seemed ordinary, except that no one ever saw them again. When Sunday evening came and the pair hadn't returned, Chris's wife Angela initially assumed they'd just lost track of time. But by midnight, her concern escalated to dread. She called park rangers, who arrived at the parking lot the next morning. The car was still there, untouched. Inside were 2 granola bar wrappers, a flashlight, and a map of the Smokies. Raven's Hollow wasn't circled, but a faint pencil mark could be seen near it, almost erased, as if Chris had changed his mind, but never fully let it go. Search teams assembled quickly, but the thick canopy and confusing terrain made aerial scans useless. Dogs caught no scent past a certain point. GPS data, hampered by the rocky region, yielded no helpful pings. That was when the first ranger quietly muttered something that no one paid attention to at the time. People say Raven's Hollow was shut down for more than just erosion. Some places were meant to be left alone. It was exactly 2:13 a.m. when Angela Walton's phone rang, jolting her awake. She sat up in bed, disoriented by the darkness and silence around her. When she glanced at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. Chris Walton flashed across it. For a moment, she felt a surge of relief so sharp it almost hurt. Maybe they were safe. Maybe they'd just gotten lost, and Chris had finally found a signal. But the relief vanished the moment she answered. There was no voice on the other end, only a faint, crackling static. Angela listened closely, heart pounding, trying to pick up any recognizable sound. At first, it was just a low rustle, like fabric brushing against the phone mic. Then came the faintest whisper of breathing. Just as she was about to speak, she heard something else: a child's soft whimpering. It was distant, muffled, but unmistakably Emily's. Her little girl was crying. And then, suddenly, Angela heard 3 words, distorted and nearly inaudible. "They found us." And the line went dead. Angela called the number back in a panic, but it didn't ring. It went straight to voicemail. She tried over and over again, each time growing more frantic. When she contacted the park rangers that morning, they immediately traced the last ping from Chris's phone. The signal had come from a remote, heavily forested region near Clawfoot Ridgewell beyond the maintained trails. A ranger who'd worked the area for over a decade quietly told her that no call had ever been placed from there before, not even by fellow rangers. The terrain was too rugged, and reception simply didn't reach it. The call shouldn't have been possible. Within hours, a fresh search team was dispatched to Clawfoot Ridge. The terrain was brutal: jagged rocks, thick underbrush, and an eerie quiet that made radios crackle with interference. At the last GPS coordinates, they found something strange. A circle of moss-covered stones that looked oddly intentional. In the center was a tiny, weather-worn charm bracelet, half buried in the soil. It matched the one Emily had been wearing when she left. But there were no footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of wildlife, just silence. After that call, Chris's phone was never heard from again. The number remained active on the account for 6 more months, but not a single message, ping, or signal ever came through. Eventually, the phone was marked as inactive, but Angela couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there buried beneath the trees, maybe deep underground, maybe moving. What haunted her most wasn't the call itself, But that brief, whispering voice, not Chris, not Emily, something else. The initial search efforts for Chris and Emily Walton were massive. Over 200 volunteers, 35 park rangers, K9 units, drones, and even helicopters equipped with infrared. For the first few days, the rescue teams remained hopeful. It wasn't the first time hikers had gotten lost in the Smokies, and usually, they were found within 48 hours. But as each day passed, the optimism started to wither. The forest gave up nothing. No dropped gear. No broken twigs. No signs of struggle. It was as if the trail itself had swallowed them whole. What made it even stranger was the complete lack of scent. The trained bloodhounds brought in from Knoxville lost Chris and Emily's scent entirely at the edge of an old stone outcrop. The dogs, known for their precision, became visibly disturbed, whining and refusing to move past the ridge. One even clawed at the ground as if trying to dig into the rocks, something it had never done on any previous search. A ranger present at the time later said, "They weren't just confused. They were scared." Search and rescue maps showed that the last GPS logged step from Chris's phone matched a fork in the trail no longer maintained by the park. It led into an area locals referred to as the Sink. An old ranger station once stood there, but it had been abandoned in the 1980s after a series of mysterious accidents, including a volunteer who went missing for 4 days and returned, unable to speak and with no memory of where he'd been. That part of the forest was now considered spiritually cursed by nearby Cherokee communities. But none of this was public knowledge at the time. After 10 days of intense searching, the operation was scaled back. The case shifted from rescue to recovery. Officials held a press conference stating they believed Chris and Emily had either become lost in a storm system or possibly fallen into one of the countless hidden ravines in the Smokies. But even that didn't sit right with the locals. An experienced hiker like Chris, in good weather, with his child, would never have strayed so far off trailin' lest something led him there. Something he didn't expect. Or something he couldn't see. Meanwhile, conspiracy threads began sprouting online. Some theorized Chris had faked the disappearance, citing the strange phone call and the journal he'd written weeks earlier about wanting to escape modern noise. Others believed they'd been taken by a recluse, by a cult, by something ancient. One forum in particular gained attention when a self-proclaimed ex-ranger shared a chilling detail. "There are parts of this forest," he wrote, "that aren't mapped for a reason. If you go off path deep enough, time behaves differently. Sound doesn't travel right. People get forgotten there." In the years following Chris and Emily's disappearance, the official case files gathered dust, but the woods didn't stay silent. Hikers, hunters, and amateur explorers who ventured near Clawfoot Ridge and the surrounding trails began reporting incidents that defied logic and explanation. One man, a photographer on a solo trip in 2021, claimed he woke up to find his boots placed upright 10 feet from his tent, perfectly aligned and pointing toward the forest. The laces were tied in a pattern he didn't recognize, tight, deliberate, and almost ceremonial. He left the park that morning and never returned. Other accounts were more disturbing. A group of campers in late 2022 reported hearing childlike laughter echoing through the trees after midnight, followed by the sound of twigs snapping around their tents in a slow, circling pattern. When they investigated in the morning, they found their fire pits scattered with fresh berries and pine cones stacked into pyramids, none of which had been there before. Local park rangers dismissed it as animals or teenagers playing pranks, but the campers were adamant. They had heard whispers, low and urgent, in a language none of them recognized. Then came the most chilling of all. In the fall of 2023, a family hiking with their dog stumbled upon something just off the main trail near Raven's Hollow, a collection of animal remains, meticulously arranged in a spiral. The bones had been cleaned, picked bare, but none showed signs of scavenger damage. The family snapped photos and sent them to park authorities. The ranger who received them went silent for 2 days before filing a vague report that simply read, "Remains appear placed. Not natural. Recommend closure of side trail." But the trail remained open. Quietly. One blurry photo taken that same year by a trail runner went viral on Reddit for a short time before being removed. It showed a distant figure, a child, possibly a girl, standing still among the trees, her head slightly tilted, arms by her side. The runner claimed she only saw the girl for a moment before she blinked and the figure was gone. Investigators reviewed the photo but said it was too pixelated to confirm anything. What made it truly eerie, though, was what the runner said next. She wasn't moving, but the trees behind her were breathing. Locals who'd lived near the Smokies for generations began warning outsiders to avoid that particular ridge after dusk. Older residents, especially from Cherokee heritage, spoke of thin places in the forest areas where the veil between worlds was fragile, where time tangled, and voices from the past still echoed. One elderly woman, interviewed anonymously, said, "That man and his child, they ain't lost, not like you think. Sometimes, the forest doesn't take people, it keeps them. And not always in the same way they went in." In early August of 2025, almost 5 years to the day since Chris and Emily vanished, hikers from Asheville, North Carolina, decided to explore a lesser-known ridgeline trail just beyond Clawfoot Ridge. The pair, James and Olivia, were experienced backpackers and had read about the strange legends tied to the area, but like many who dismiss online stories as folklore, they came looking for adventure. What they found, however, would soon make national headlines and reawaken a mystery that had nearly faded from public memory, late into their second day. While navigating a narrow pass between two jagged outcroppings, Olivia spotted something unusual wedged deep in a moss-lined crevice, just barely visible beneath a layer of leaves and dirt. She thought it was trash at first, until James reached down and pulled out an old rusted metal lunchbox, the kind children used to carry in the 90s. It was dented and cold to the touch, despite the summer heat. Its latch was stuck, corroded with time, but eventually gave way with a brittle snap. What they found inside made Olivia step back in horror. Inside the box were several objects, carefully placed and hauntingly preserved. A child's drawing done in crayon, showing a stick figure man and a girl holding hands beside a tree with something dark behind it. A cracked compass, its needle spinning uncontrollably. A small Polaroid photo of Chris and Emily taken on a picnic, one not released to the public. And most disturbingly, a journal, water-damaged but still legible. The final pages were torn, smudged, and written in a frantic hand. One entry, dated Day 8, simply read, "We are not alone. I hear them breathing at night. I don't think they sleep. I don't know how much longer we can hide." Terrified but trying to stay composed, James snapped photos of the items and marked the GPS coordinates. They returned to their campsite but barely slept that night, convinced they were being watched. Branches cracked around them. At one point, Olivia swore she heard a child whispering her name from the darkness. They hiked out at dawn, silent and pale, not speaking until they reached cell service and called park authorities. The ranger who took their report instructed them not to share the location with anyone else and promised a team would be dispatched immediately. But something strange happened next. When officials arrived at the marked coordinates 2 days later, the crevice was there but the lunchbox was gone. No trace of it remained. The soil had been disturbed, and the moss peeled back as if something or someone had returned for it. Fortunately, James's photos served as undeniable proof of what they'd found. A forensic team confirmed the journal was in Chris Walton's handwriting, and yet, the last sentence of that entry, scrawled hastily and nearly illegible, sent a chill down the spine of every agent who read it. "They took the light. I can't protect her anymore. If someone finds this, don't follow the music." After the discovery of the lunchbox and the horrifying final journal entry, park officials quietly brought in a specialized cave exploration team from Tennessee, trained in navigating tight and unmapped underground systems. Their mission was to investigate the area surrounding the crevice where the box had been found, in hopes of uncovering where Chris and Emily might have gone or been taken. With ground-penetrating radar and climbing gear in tow, the team worked under the radar to avoid media attention. What they discovered would never be publicly disclosed, but fragments of their report would later be leaked by a whistleblower. Beneath the ridge, partially hidden behind a wall of overgrown roots and rocks, was a vertical shaft barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It dropped nearly 40 feet into pitch-black silence. At the bottom, the team entered a narrow passageway that led to a small cavern. The air was heavy, damp, and filled with a smell none of them could describe, like burnt moss and something decaying. The cave walls were jagged and marked by strange indentations, too rough for tool marks, but too patterned to be random. One climber described them as dragged grooves, like something clawed its way around the stone. Inside, the team found the remnants of a makeshift camp, a small ring of burnt wood and charred leaves, likely a long-dead fire. Scattered nearby were fragments of a torn blanket, a rusted can opener, and the unmistakable form of a stuffed bear. Weathered and dirt-stained, Emily's bear. It was positioned upright on a rock as if it had been deliberately placed there. Not abandoned, not forgotten, preserved. On one of the cave walls, faintly etched into the limestone, was a symbol: two intersecting circles with jagged slashes crossing through them. The explorers had never seen anything like it. The deepest chamber, barely accessible through a low crawl space, held something even more disturbing. A boot. It was water-damaged and partially buried in mud, but unmistakably the same hiking boot Chris Walton had worn. Confirmed by a unique stitch pattern visible in the original missing persons photo. There were no human remains, no bones. But the boot was positioned next to another set of markings, small overlapping handprints, pressed into the dirt in clusters. Some looked like a child's, others, much larger, and with too many fingers. What unsettled the team the most wasn't just what they found, it was what they felt. Radios began to malfunction inside the chamber, emitting bursts of static or silence. A few members reported hearing faint music, though none could agree on the melody. One even claimed he saw movement in the shadows, low to the ground, though thermal sensors showed nothing. When they finally ascended back into daylight, several team members refused to return. Their unofficial debrief noted only one sentence to describe what they had seen below: "There's something down there, and it watches from the dark." When the forensic team analyzed the journal found in the rusted lunchbox, they confirmed not only that the handwriting matched Chris Walton's, but also that the ink was consistent with the kind used in his personal notebook, retrieved from home years earlier. But there was something strange: pages in the middle were missing, as if they had been ripped out intentionally. The journal's final entries, smudged with water and dirt, hinted at increasing desperation, cryptic references to the Watchers, the breathing, and a repeated warning to stay away from the song. For a long time, investigators believed that was the journal's final message until they re-examined the binding. Tucked deep inside the back cover, wedged between the spine and the glued paper lining, was a thin, folded scrap of paper. It had gone unnoticed in the initial scans. When carefully opened, it revealed a single, handwritten message, erratic, misspelled in places, and clearly scribbled in haste. It read, "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I tried. I kept her safe as long as I could. They come when the wind stops. They don't like the light." She followed the music. "Tell her, I'm not mad, just don't follow the music." There was no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Chris's. For many on the investigative team, this message transformed the case from a tragic disappearance to something far more disturbing. Around the same time, hikers in the area began reporting a phenomenon none had mentioned before: an almost imperceptible melody that would rise just before dusk in the deep woods near Clawfoot Ridge. It wasn't loud or distinct, but rather soft, hollow, and oddly rhythmic, like wind chimes underwater or a lullaby played backward. Those who heard it said it always seemed to come from just beyond where they stood, drawing them further off trail. Most turned back. A few didn't. Park records show at least 3 additional missing persons reports filed between 2024 and 2025 from hikers who had ventured near that same area. One particular audio recording, captured by a nature YouTuber documenting ambient forest sounds, picked up a faint musical phrase, something that resembled a child humming, followed by a voice whispering words barely audible. "Come see." Experts tried to clean up the audio, but it degraded rapidly when processed, something the technician called unnatural data decay. Some believed it was a hoax, others weren't so sure. The YouTuber, visibly shaken, later removed the video and posted a final update: "The forest is not empty. I'm done. Don't ask me again." But the most shocking detail came not from audio or journals, but from something visual. A tech-savvy investigator used enhanced imaging to examine the Polaroid photo found in the lunchbox, the one of Chris and Emily on their picnic. At first glance, it was just a heartwarming memory. But when digitally enhanced, something became visible in the shadows between the trees behind them. A shape, tall, twisted, watching. Its form wasn't human, but its outline was clear. And its position, standing perfectly still among the trunks, aligned with the drawing Emily had placed inside the box. The tree, the man and child, and the dark figure behind them. To this day, neither Chris Walton nor his daughter Emily has ever been found. The trail where they vanished has since been quietly removed from official park maps. Rangers no longer speak of Clawfoot Ridge, and hikers who ask too many questions are politely warned to stay on the main paths. But the forest hasn't forgotten. Every August, like clockwork, reports still surface of laughter in the trees, footprints that appear overnight, and that faint, beckoning melody that no one can trace but no one forgets. Some believe Chris died trying to protect his daughter from something none of us can understand. Others believe Emily might still be alive, changed, hidden, or trapped, somewhere between. Whatever truth lies beneath the Smokies, one thing is certain. Chris's final words weren't just a message. They were a warning. Don't follow the music. And if you ever find yourself deep in the woods, listening to the wind, make sure it's only the wind.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.